Center Congregational Church, 1842. The Brattleboro Village Meetinghouse Society was organized in 1814 for the purpose of building a meeting house in the East Village. The population center of Brattleboro had been in the West Village, but more and more people were settling closer to the Connecticut River. At first, services were held in a schoolhouse located on the Common, but people residing in the East Village wanted to have a proper house of worship. The Center Congregational Church began when 14 members organized to build a church in the East Village. 2 were men and 12 were women. A parcel known as the Common was purchased in 1815 for $300, and the first meeting house was built at a cost of $4,000 to $5,000. Services began on July 5, 1816. The church was formally dedicated on August 22, 1816. The front door faced to the south, and the building sat on the Common near where a historic marker is now sited. There was a storage cellar and horse sheds crossed in back of the building. The church on the Common had many windows of plain glass, since the early Congregationalists believed that any ornamentation of their house of worship was a distraction from hearing the Word and communing with God. There were no blinds, no curtains, and the interior was flooded with an intense light. With increased settlement, it became clear that there was a need for a more central place of worship. The church was dismantled in 1842 and reconstructed in an altered manner on this site. The pew owners had to agree to the move because the pews were their individual property. They were unanimous in approval. In 1842, the decision was made to tear down the original meeting house and rebuild it where it now stands on Main Street. The new site was then known as the Orchard. A small bank building stood very close to the south side of the new meeting house. Only a walkway separated the two. The new church design, a little larger, was basically the same as the old. The first meeting of the new house took place January 5, 1843 at 9 a.m. The new structure was dedicated on January the 11th, 1843, and here is found the first mention of Center Church in the church records. According to Reverend Harding, when the building was put back together after its journey from the Common, one half of the windows were left out because they had found that the glare of the sun on the snow was so bright that they couldn't see the minister in the pulpit. The church was small, with a solid steeple, no spire, and pillars in front. There was a single-faced clock, and the bell swung in plain sight. The box pews had doors. There was a center aisle and 2 side aisles with 4 rows of pews. In those days, members bought and decorated their own pews and contributed to the minister's salary and the upkeep of the meeting house. When non-pew owners came to church, they had to pay the owners for the privilege of sitting. Former Vermont Governor Frederick Holbrook, reminiscing, said, "My father's pew was the northeast corner wall pew and probably the coldest pew in the house. My good mother always carried a foot stove of live coals in cold weather, as did most of the ladies." Some years later, a huge stove was placed in the vestibule of the meeting house. On January 12th, 1915, the church and society were consolidated and incorporated under the name of Center Congregational Church. Later that year, it was voted that pews would be free to all. In 1864, a violent storm blew down the spire, severing it above the clock chamber. This event, and a contemporary need for more interior space, caused the alteration of the west front to its present form. The central tower is 3 times the height of the main block through 4 stages, and a culminating spire with a metal weather vane on top. A newspaper article dating August 24, 1888, states that the church was newly painted brown with trimmings a few shades darker. In 1916, the church returned its current white color. At the time of its reconstruction on the present site, the church possessed a substantially different appearance. The tower's second stage contains the original town clock, installed in 1816 when the church was constructed on its original site. Again in 1929, the tower was partly destroyed by a fire that also damaged the roof, but subsequently was rebuilt to match its previous appearance. The clap house next door to the church on the south was purchased, and the Wells Wing was erected in 1966 to make adequate classroom space for the large number of students attending Sunday school. In 1981, the historic integrity of the church was compromised by the application of vinyl sheathing to the side elevations and the two-story additions. The sheathing conceals the original clapboards, cornices, and other stylistic elements. Only the west front and the lower retain their historic appearance.